indicating that he will be the white jersey at the end of the afternoon.
Lance Armstrong just letting the warm air puff out of his body as he calms himself down for the huge effort here that he knows would be his. He would love to make this a 10th individual time trial victory, his 5th of this Tour de France. He picks these records off trees like you're in an orchard full of apples. And now he's waiting for the rollout.
Concentration on his eyes. He knows history is about to repeat itself if he can win this, because over the last 6 years he has always won the final time trial, except once, and that was last year.
Armstrong underway here now as he settles in. He wears number 1. He's won the Tour de France for the past 5 years. He's now underway in a time trial which really will only announce him as the winner of the Tour de France tomorrow. I don't think anybody is going to match him today. So Armstrong is now underway. All the remaining riders in the Tour de France have either finished or are ahead of Lance Armstrong. Floyd Landis sits in the finish house as the leader. Will Armstrong be the next one? We'll take a break. Back to the Tour de France as we now have everybody out on the course. This is Mancebo on course at the moment. 34 miles is the time trial. The Americans are celebrating a wonderful time trial so far, because at the first check now we have Americans in the top 3 positions. Levi Leipheimer has gone through with the 3rd best time, 28 seconds behind Floyd Landis, with Bobby Julich in between. Landis and Julich are finished, and they hold 1st and 2nd in the time trial. But of course Jan Ullrich might have other plans. Here he is down on course, the crowd craning their necks there to see this man come through, as they're cutting off, of course, the shortest way around that corner by standing there looking out for him. This is Vladimir, no, this is back to Mancebo out on course again here. Or is it? No, it's Vladimir Karpich taking his time down the mountain. But he is actually doing a great ride. He's sitting 3rd overall at the 2nd time check. And Voigtler here now, as you can see, as he comes up to this 2nd time check. Landis there is in 1st place at 44 minutes. And I'm afraid to say that already Karpich came through here in 44.41. He only wanted 45 seconds. He's now got over 2 minutes. So Voigtler well and truly out of that white jersey, which I find rather sad, really. 47.03 against 44.41 for Karpich, and the clock hasn't stopped yet. So I guess he probably knew that was going to happen. 47.15, Paul, and that's a 3-minute, almost a 3-minute advantage now. What a massive margin Karpich now has over Voigtler.
Huge. It was to be expected. You can't take away from the fact that this young man, Thomas Voigtler, has left a lot of his energy on the road to the Tour de France here this afternoon. And in fact, Karpich is riding a very good, solid ride here. 3rd place at the last time check indicates that he's going to finish quite possibly at the end of the day in the top 10 in this individual time trial.
Yeah, you could be absolutely right. And he's inspired by the fact he wants that jersey. The white jersey is best rookie. 51.51 in 4th best time now. The next check is against 50.57, so he's still riding extremely well.
Very good time that for this young man as we go back to the last man on the road. Number 1, Lance Armstrong, the winner of the Tour de France for the last 5 years, and now trying to extend his lead in the overall classification. And I'm sure he is nurturing hopes of winning this individual time trial here as well.
Well, Armstrong is looking good, but we won't know what he's doing for a few kilometres yet. We're still waiting for the arrival of all of the top men here. Now, don't forget, experienced Lance's life at top speed, because he's facing his ultimate challenge. We're featuring exclusive access of his journey towards this record 6 Tour de France win. It's all in the Lance Chronicles tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on OLN. Armstrong now looking very, very good. And through our picture breakup, sorry about that, that was a brief glimpse of Jan Ullrich. Don't forget, Ullrich starting 12 minutes in front of Lance Armstrong. All of these riders being split by 3-minute intervals. And it goes Ullrich, Kloden, Basso, and then finally Armstrong. The idea being they're hoping the riders won't come together. Well, I wonder if Armstrong will catch Basso. This is Andreas Kloden.
Andreas Kloden. It's quite interesting, the two German riders, they're using a much higher gear than Armstrong appears to be using and turning it over just that little bit slower. Here's a study of power. This is Jan Ullrich, the Olympic gold medalist in the road race and the Olympic silver medalist in the time trial from Sydney just 4 years ago, a title which he will hope to defend in a couple of weeks' time. He's got a very sensible choice of gears. There's his full disc wheel at the back to make that machine as aerodynamic as possible. He's opted for a spoked wheel in the front, carbon fiber spoked wheel, very deep rims. These bikes are very rigid, and you can see he's trying to get himself as low as possible. His position doesn't give anything away when we look at it.
Well, Ullrich, it looks as though he's absolutely flying down there at the moment. He is going slightly downhill, of course. Don't forget, by the way, AOL for broadband members. Go to AOL keyword, Tour de France or AOL.com. Mancebo here, he's done well to hold on to 6th place, because as you can see, he's suffered his way around this last week or so. He's been steadily slipping away in his favourite mountains, but he's still got 6th place there, as Acevedo is the rider riding behind him. And he's another man who could deliver again for US Postal today. Don't forget, we'll be back. So too will Lance Armstrong. Back to the Tour de France. Everybody is underway now. These are the legs of Vladimir Karpitz, who's riding the ride of his life for the white jersey at least. As we now switch here to Christophe Moreau, who is not doing a great ride, but he is hanging in there. Here is Christophe Moreau now at the second point, 44.54 and counting. Floyd Landis through here in 44 minutes dead. He's conceding just around a minute here to Landis. That's a great ride by Landis, isn't it? And the clock's still going on here for Christophe Moreau. He's lying 10th in the Tour de France, which is, he's lying 12th in the Tour de France. And this ride, I thought he would have used his time trialing ability a little better. He won the prologue in Dunkirk a few years ago.
Well, I think he's left a lot of energy out on the open roads, trying to rival riders like Richard Virenque at the top of one or two of the mountain passes. And I wonder if that energy is being paid for here this afternoon. After all, he is the best Frenchman in the overall classification in 12th place. I don't think his ride today is really going to change that position at all, because he should be locked into 12th at the end of the day. This is Axel Merckx now coming into the finishing line.
Merckx coming up. He's had a good Tour de France this year, Axel Merckx. And here he comes, and this is being a good time trial as well here for him as he comes up towards the line. Axel Merckx hanging on to 17th place at the moment. This is 6th attempt at the Tour de France. His best place was in 1998 when he finished 10th. He won't do that this year. 17th in the time trial.
Good ride by Axel. Again, a very high average speed, 45 kilometers an hour as he crosses the line. He doesn't look as if he's completely and utterly pushed himself right to the edge, as we're still waiting for time checks to come in. There is Jan Ullrich out on the course, an incredibly powerful beast of a man, using a huge gear. And I think today he's opted for a 54-tooth chainring on the front, and on the back an 11-tooth sprocket to try and develop one of the largest gears of any of the big contenders in the Tour de France. His cranks that you can just see there as well are the longest cranks, longer than anybody else's, 177.5 millimeters to Lance Armstrong's 175 millimeters. And that is an indication that he uses more power than suppleness.
And that's obvious by just looking at him here, I think. Mancebo's gone through the 18-kilometer check, not setting any houses on fire there, with 26th place, conceding a minute and 19 seconds to Floyd Landis at that point. So we're looking here now at Jan Ullrich continues on his way. The situation down at 18 kilometers. Landis still leads there, 23.36. Julich at 23.51. Leipheimer at 24.05. All Americans. Then comes Jens Voigt, Rubiera and Vladimir Karpitz at 18 kilometers. They're all heading up now towards the next check there. And the next man to arrive down at 18 kilometers will be Jose Acevedo, and I think we'll be interested to see that time.
It will be very interesting to see the time of Acevedo, who wants to stay in 5th place in the overall classification. Looking down here on Ivan Basso for the first time since he came out of the starting gate. He looks pretty good. He spent a lot of time trying to improve his Achilles heel, as we get confirmation of Acevedo's time at 18 kilometers, 3rd best time, just 24 seconds down on his teammate Floyd Landis. Now, US Postal this afternoon are trying to stamp their authority on this final individual time trial.
It just shows you what a strong team they had. Acevedo's now split the 3 Americans at that 18-kilometer check, moving in with a 24-minute and 1 second ride. The 2 ahead of him just broke the 24-minute barrier. And I wonder what Jan Ullrich will do, because he's the next man to arrive, and he's got to do it in less than 3 minutes if he's ahead of Acevedo. Meanwhile, Lance Armstrong settling in now. This man, as usual, his whole body working away here. 18 kilometers time. There's the time of Landis. Lance is at 15 minutes. So Lance Armstrong, still plenty of time there, because we've still got to see the arrival of Basso and Kloden and Ullrich at that first time check. We'll take a quick break. As we look now at Ivan Basso, he's not too far away from getting through the 18-kilometer point. And we have a few shocks in line at 18 kilometers. And the time trial here now, the first check of the day, remember, as riders have started to arrive now. Let me now update you completely. And look at this now, because Jan Ullrich has just gone through best time, but 4 seconds behind, and snapping at his heels is his teammate Andreas Kloden. Both of them going quicker than Floyd Landis, and Acevedo, who went through in 3rd at the time, is now down into 5th place. At the finishing line, the men who finished their effort, it is still Floyd Landis in front ahead of Bobby Julich. 3 Americans sitting in the top 4 places. And US Postal today are piling on the pressure as well. This is Andreas Kloden here now. He has conceded only 4 seconds to his teammate after 18 kilometers. So he's going to conserve at least his 3rd place. It'll be interesting now, Paul, to see how Kloden compares with Ivan Basso when he comes through, because I think he's certainly going to hold his 3rd place, and he's shooting for 2nd.
Well, I think looking just a few moments ago at Ivan Basso out on the course, he actually looked rather good, and he spent a lot of time. He's invested the time and money during the winter months to go and put himself into a wind tunnel to try and improve the weakest part of his cycling discipline. That's the individual time trial. So yes, I think the 18-kilometer check for Ivan Basso is going to be a very important one.
And he is due there in about 1.5 minutes, I would think, if he's going to be rivaling Andreas Kloden and Jan Ullrich. We're looking at Vladimir Karpitz here, who's absolutely annihilating poor Thomas Vogler today. So he will win the white jersey, which he hasn't yet worn, but he's going to get it today. This is Levi Leipheimer as he continues on course, also riding up amongst the leaderboard. This is the 2nd check for Levi. As he comes up, there's Landis's time of 44 minutes flat. Levi isn't rivaling that, but he is very much in the frame here, and he's looking to climb 1 place in the overall with a good ride today. And I wonder, he's aiming at Carlos Sastre and his time. And we haven't got Sastra's time at the moment, as Leipheimer now comes up towards the summit to top 6. Just a little bit off his best form, perhaps, because the Americans today are having a sensational time trial. 6 at the moment, 45.02.
Which is slowing, I think, a little bit in the second part of the course, but this is the man who the French are now nicknaming the Armstrong Gator, after the Terminator, which used to be actually Aitor Gonzalez. Armstrong looking good, nice and steady on his machine, hardly moving at all.
Well, he looks extremely well. Lance Armstrong riding extremely well now, waiting for his time. Basso has gone through, by the way, 3rd best time. The top 3 riders of the 4, except Armstrong hasn't got there yet, are now rivaling everybody. So there's no doubt that the 4 men who are champion of the Tour de France are going to probably go through with the 4 best times at the first check. We're only waiting now for the arrival of Armstrong. Sandy Cassar comes in 18th place there, 1:12. So Cassar is in. Ullrich best still, with only Armstrong to arrive at 18 kilometers. So don't forget, OLN has covered every pedal crank during this Tour de France, from Liège to Paris of Lance Armstrong. Make sure you're with us for the Lance Armstrong interview on the August the 1st, next Sunday at 7 p.m. This is the arrival now of Vladimir Karpitz. He's done a great ride, this man. It's given him the white jersey as best rookie. He comes in with 4th place at 1:10.22, and that will be enough to give him the best rookie of the Tour. But we're waiting for the arrival of Armstrong at 18 kilometers. His rivals are on form. I'm sure Lance is. We'll take a break. Tour de France to Lance Armstrong, the Tour de Lance, the Tour de Force, call it what you like, but this man now, if we were to stop the race, would have a lead of 5 minutes over his nearest rival in the race. Armstrong is doing his usual. He is winning the time trial. 43 seconds ahead of Jan Ullrich at the first check at 18 kilometres. While down at the finishing house, it's his teammate Landis who leads. At 18 kilometres, there you have it. Armstrong of 43 seconds ahead of Ullrich. Kloden doing the ride of his life, so too Basso. They are locked together on same time, just 4 seconds slower than this man, Jan Ullrich. And the top 4 riders in the Tour de France are the top 4 men in the time trial at the 18-kilometre check. Absolutely amazing. Looking down here, 43.59 is Lance's time at the next check. Ullrich is a little way from that yet. He's going through the 35-minute point just now. And it's Landis, Julich and Carpets at the second check. But the 4 big names of the Tour de France are claiming everything for themselves along the way.
They certainly are, but I'm very impressed with the ride by Ivan Basso. There was a huge question mark on that man's shoulders as to how he was going to rival the big powerhouses of the individual time trial. I think he knew he couldn't rival Lance Armstrong, but what he's indicated to us at 18 kilometres is he's able to hold his own with Andreas Kloden and Jan Ullrich. He started the day with 1 minute and 2 seconds advantage over Andreas Kloden, and so far he's hardly lost anything at all.
That's absolutely right, and let's see how the next section goes, because it was a rather hilly start and it gets a bit easier. It might favour Ullrich a little bit more as we get flatter, but at the start of the day, Basso 4:09 behind Armstrong, 5 minutes 11 behind Kloden. He's now opening those gaps again by another 43 seconds on his nearest rival, so he's almost 5 minutes ahead now of his nearest rival. His biggest winning margin is over 7 minutes, and he's nudging it out.
He certainly is nudging it out, because I can see his gap at the finishing line, if he continues to ride at this speed and this cadence, being at least 1.5 minutes over the second place rider, and it may well be 2 minutes over Ivan Basso.
Carlos Sastre has arrived. He was the last rider to arrive at, here he is by the way, at the check at the second checkpoint, where he is only in 9th place. This is Richard Virenque. He's arriving now at the finish, and you've got the crowd are cheering in the minute he came up on the big screen here. They just love this man, and he gets a huge applause as he comes in. All the photographers taking his photograph. The winner of the King of the Mountains for a record-breaking 7th time. He gets his 24th place in the time trial.
He's really laid the foundations of his victory here in this King of the Mountains classification on only 2 stages, when he's been out on long escapes and built up a big lead in that race.
Just looking down there at the time trial there, that's the style of Andreas Kloden. He looks like a very, very powerful time trial rider anyway, and he's now proving he certainly is. Beautiful position. The road race champion of Germany, as he looks really smooth now, and he's going to take a lot of help from his recent time check. Anyway, don't forget, straight after our coverage of the Tour de France, up next will be the bravest countdown on television, as we bring you the 25 most courageous comebacks in outdoor and action sports. That's Countdown Courage 25, all new, right here after the Tour de France coverage. Big crowd continuing as we continue, and it looks like Kloden is riding one of the time trials of his life here. He's not a regular time trial winner, but he certainly is proving it today that the road race champion of Germany can also turn a nifty pedal when he is riding a time trial. He too is also looking pretty good right now. Well, 2 Germans, an Italian and an American. Don't forget that we still have ahead the commercial-free half hour from Powerbar. That'll come up towards the end of the stage, and we'll be able to follow these top 4 men all of the way towards the finish. Well, there's what it's like to ride behind Lance Armstrong, and just how quickly does this man pedal. He's heading up towards the second check now. 43.59 is still the best time there.
Laipila still holding on to 6th fastest time at 40 kilometres, 1 minute 15 down. But I think the performances this afternoon are the US Postal Service, because still at that point it's Floyd Landis with the fastest time. Armstrong's cadence is still exactly the same. It's nice and high. He's ticking over around about 100 revolutions for every minute. He's using a gear slightly slower than that of Jan Ullrich, and of course slightly smaller than that of Andreas Klöden as well. But it is being pedaled at a much more efficient cadence, which is probably pushing him around about half a kilometer an hour faster than the other two Germans.
We're still looking at about 9 minutes or so before Ullrich leads the charge through that second checkpoint. At 35 kilometers, you see on Klöden here, he's going through 37 minutes. Landis is already there. This is Mancebo now. He's next to arrive at this checkpoint. He's slipping away quite a lot, actually, and it might be costing him a place in the overall classification. Mancebo only 29th as he goes through at 46.28. He's not a man who likes the time trials.
He certainly isn't, but he's managing to keep in contact with the time of Georg Tocznik, and that's the man I think he was a little bit worried about, because Tocznik was just over a minute behind him at the start of the day. I just did a quick calculation, Phil. Over the first 18 kilometers, Armstrong was beating Ullrich and Klöden by around about 2.5 seconds for every kilometer of the ride, which is massive.
That is going to probably give us a minute 40 beating of the field if Armstrong keeps that sort of pressure on towards the finish. But right now, this has been a time trial for the Americans today, because down at the finish there, they hold first, second overall at the finishing line, and they have been dictating the race pattern throughout. We've seen the white jersey change hands now, because Vladimir Karpic has finished, and even though Volker hasn't, it won't matter, because he has lost by miles that white jersey, rather sadly so. Landis still leads in the finish with a 1:9.14 rather. This is Azevedo's check, the Portuguese, continuing to go well here. Now, is he going to hang on for the moment to that third place, because the boys behind are knocking him down. All of them are rivaling the time of Jose Azevedo. This is the second check, remember, at 34. He's gone through in 6th place now, 44.49, so he is beginning to slow. There's the face of Azevedo, ace as we call it, and so as we continue now to run the big boys towards the Courchevel time check at 35 kilometers. This is Ullrich. Armstrong is also on course. When we come back, we'll be in our commercial-free break with Powerbar. We wanted to see Jan Ullrich now in the time trial, arriving at the second check. Now, when he arrived at the first check, he was best time. There's Landis's time. It looks like he's done it again. 43.17. Ullrich is now best time, but of course, there's still Armstrong behind him, and he's absolutely flying. Just look at the determination there. Now, I can see Volker coming in. Here he is. He's down the straight here now. Now, the clock will be interesting here, but I think Thomas Volker has well said goodbye to that white jersey. His body in the Tour de France completely shattered by his 3 weeks of riding. What a tour it's been. He will not be taking home the white jersey or the yellow jersey, both of which he's worn, because his time is way off track here. He is going to concede in excess of 6 minutes on this one ride alone, when he couldn't afford to concede 45 seconds. And that is unfortunate for Thomas Volker, but the crowd are giving him an enormous welcome. He comes in 1:16.30, and that compares to Karpic 1:10.04. 6 minutes and 26 seconds too slow. Now, back out to check number 2 here. This is Andreas Klöden. Let's see what he can do. He's still doing well here. He's rivaling Ullrich. Well, Paul, he was 4 seconds behind Ullrich, and now he's falling a little bit away. He's now gone back 17 seconds, but he's holding Ullrich in his sights.
Well, I think this is a remarkable performance by this man as he comes up towards the second time check at 35 kilometers at Courchevel. It's an indication that he's riding very well indeed. He hasn't lost all that much time, and he should, theoretically, if he continues at this pace and doesn't hit the wall, he should be able to keep his third place all the way up to Paris. What I'm waiting for now is to see the time of Ivan Basso, because Ivan Basso could be threatened by Andreas Klöden. Those two riders in second and third place were only separated by 1 minute and 2 seconds at the start of the day.
Well, that's an amazing piece of riding. We expected a good time, so although I have to say of Andreas Klöden, he's only slightly below the power of Jan Ullrich. This is Christophe Moreau, getting a bit washed away, but he is still the best Frenchman and will remain the best Frenchman in this year's Tour de France. He's heading up to the finishing line now. It's a very, very good ride, and up amongst the front runners He is a good time trialist. They're not quite at the top rank of this level, but he's going to come home. He gets a huge cheer too as he's introduced as the leading Frenchman in the Tour de France. Christophe Moreau gets to the line. So far, 11th place. But with the boys coming in behind him, he'll be lucky to make the top 15 now. Out on course with Lance Armstrong here. We're still waiting. Cloden has gone through that second check. We've seen him go. Waiting for Basso to arrive at the second check now as well. At that check at 35 kilometers, Ulrich 43.16, Cloden 43.34. Landis is in third place at the moment there. Armstrong himself out on course and riding, we believe, extremely quickly, as quick as he's ever ridden the time trial. As he continues on the way, remember, he was 43 seconds quicker than Ulrich. Only 2 riders left to arrive now at the second check. Basso cannot be far away. Cloden must have gone through it now about 2 minutes ago. And Basso and Cloden at the last check were separated by only 4 seconds.
Well, Armstrong picking his way down. He doesn't seem to be taking too many risks on this descent part of the course. He wants to keep himself nice and safe. He doesn't have to crash on a stage like this. He is in complete control. At the first time check, he went through 43 seconds faster than Jan Ullrich, but he certainly wants to try and win this stage if he can. He makes it a point of honor.
This is now Ullrich on course, and just to remind you, we are enjoying a commercial-free half hour with Powerbar. Jan Ullrich now trying to at least blaze the leading trail to the finish, if not the winning one. This now is Ivan Basso. He must be very, very close to coming to that checkpoint. Yes, he is now. Now, Cloden was only 4 seconds. He was locked in the same time last time. Now, Cloden's gone through in 43.35. There is Ulrich's time, and now it looks as though Basso has begun to slow a little bit. He's dropped behind Cloden and into third place here, and the seconds continue to count. So he started well on the hillier section, Paul, but now it's got to the pure speed sections. He's falling away a little bit.
He is falling away just a little bit, but at 34.2 kilometers, he's still well up there in second place in the overall classification. But it is going to be a massive battle over the next 20 kilometers. They are going to be the most important 20 kilometers of Ivan Basso's career. The time is still going on. He's dropping down into fourth place now. He's gone through there in fourth, 48 seconds down on Jan Ullrich. But in fact, 30 seconds down on Andreas Cloden. He can only lose now 32 seconds between here and the finish.
Oh, that is going to ask an awful lot, I think. He's gone behind the time, in fact, as well, of Floyd Landis at that point by 6 seconds. And Landis, remember, still the leader in at the finishing line. And Basso is going to suffer this last half of the course. He has only done 35 kilometers. He's got 20 kilometers to go. He can't afford to lose that much time over the remaining 20 kilometers. Andreas Cloden is looking now at second place in the eyes.
He's looking at second place, and he will have had those time gaps communicated to him, and that will push him up over the latter part of the course, which actually suits him.
Here is Pereiro, another teammate of Tyler Hamilton. The Phonak team, without Tyler Hamilton, have stayed right up amongst the leaderboard in this race. With Tyler, they would have done that much better. A 13th place finish so far for Pereiro, 1:12.10. Now Oscar Pereiro should be happy enough with that. He's proving to be a pretty good bike rider, that man. And let's hope he can find Tyler with him next year when they come back into the Tour de France. So at the finishing house, just a quick reminder, Landis is there as we watch Lance Armstrong as well. Julich is still in second, Voigt is third, and Karpitz has finished in fourth and got the white jersey. Here is Lance Armstrong coming up now to that 34-kilometer check, and it is another enormous performance by this man. Ullrich, best time, 43.70 in a full minute. Oh, I'm still counting, sorry. 42.20, getting too excited there, Paul, as we go over the top of the climb, but he's still pulling away from Ullrich here. The face of Armstrong, the determination. Look at the crowd as they bring him through here. 42.31, and best time for Armstrong with just about 20 kilometers to ride. 42 minutes and 31 seconds. Well, there's no doubt now that Armstrong is heading for his 5th stage win. Well, this is an incredible performance yet again by Lance Armstrong. 42 minutes 31 at the second check, 46 seconds advantage. He's only added 3 seconds on that second stretch.
Well, I think he obviously started very quickly. He's keeping himself nice and stable. It reminds me of a time trial a couple of years ago where Armstrong started very quickly and then began to fade down towards the end. In fact, Ulrich came in and started to catch him in the last 5 or 6 kilometers. But Armstrong still has the advantage, 46 seconds ahead of Jan Ulrich, a minute 4 ahead of Andreas Kloden, and a minute 29 ahead of his teammate Floyd Landis. He is absolutely flying along, but I think he might just be holding something back after the information he's got from all of his other teammates, like Tricky Beltran, like Floyd Landis. They will have communicated to him how the race is and where you need to conserve energy and where you need to expend it.
Well, Armstrong just using the whole course here. You think he was driving a racing car the way he chops through the S's. As Armstrong confirmed there now at 46 seconds. Ulrich has raced on to the next check of 40 kilometers. He's now gone through there as anticipated, putting Landis 47 seconds off that leaderboard now into second place.
Strong performance by Jan Ulrich, but now we're moving back to the second from last rider on the race, Ivan Basso. This is his team car as we peek around there to see what he looks like. He's still looking very good to me, but he has now got into the part of the course that doesn't suit him quite that much. There is Bjarne Riis in the team car, giving him information, encouraging him, trying to keep him at a high pedaling cadence. He spent a lot of time and money to improve his time trialing. He knew it was his weakest point, and he's now hoping to try and stay in contact with second place. He's lost already 30 seconds of his advantage, and Kloden, by the way, has just gone through the 40-kilometer point, 15 seconds slower than Jan Ulrich.
Well, that is a very good time for Kloden, because he was 19 seconds. He's actually started to go or catch up on Ulrich at that third check.
That's amazing, and it's all going to be, I think, the last 15 kilometers of this individual time trial here are very difficult indeed. And it's probably why Armstrong has held back a little bit in the middle section of the course, because he wants to explode over the last 20 kilometers.
Well, there's no doubt that Kloden is reacting here to the fact that he is very, very close here now to Ivan Basso, and he's actually started to ride the course faster than Jan Ulrich.
Well, the difference between these two riders in the overall classification is a mere 18 seconds now. That's all that the man on the left-hand side, Ivan Basso, has of his advantage over Andreas Kloden since the start of the day, when they were separated by a minute and 2 seconds. Ivan Basso is going to have to do something very special to try and keep in second place. But look at that. It's ticking by slowly but surely, the difference between the two of them. It's basically only the 20-second difference. And I have a feeling it's going to tip towards the shoulders of this man here.
Well, Kloden is riding a very, very inspired time trial here as he continues now to race. He won the time trial stage in Paris-Nice in the year 2000 when he won that event, but this is going to go down as the time trial of his life. Here's Levi Leipheimer now, who may not be aware of the battle for the top 3 places in the Tour de France. He is trying to now claim 8th place as he comes up to the finish with a very, very good time indeed. 6th place, Carlos Sastre better be on a good ride here if he's going to keep 1 place ahead of him. As Leipheimer, a big grimace on his face, needs every second, and he knows it. As he hits the line, he's going to cross it. 7th best at the moment, 1:10.55.
Good ride by him. He looks back. He's well inside of the top 10, over 46.5 kilometers an hour, his average speed. And with a good ride here over Carlos Sastre, he might just pull himself up into 8th place in the overall classification. The two riders were separated by just a minute and 11 seconds at the start of the day. Armstrong, I think, now is starting to pick up the acceleration, Phil, on this very difficult middle section of the course.
Lance Armstrong still pulling away from the rest of the field here as he now stamps away on this little climb. Ironically riding over the supporters of T-Mobile, the other 2 riders who are just ahead of him. And it looks as though Andreas Kloden is about to claim 2nd place in the Tour de France, and he's still closing in on his own teammate Jan Ulrich as well. There's no way Ulrich now can catch Andreas Kloden. This is Ivan Basso now, and he's slowing down, and it's not good news for him. He'll be the next man at the 40 kilometers check, where now Kloden is closing in on Jan Ulrich, and he's closing in, more importantly, on 2nd place in the Tour.
Very talented bike rider here. We saw him a couple of years ago in the year 2000 as what we thought was going to be the next German star. Then he wallowed around and wasn't able to confirm his victory in Paris-Nice. He did get himself third place in the Olympic Games that year, but for the 3 years after that, he has wallowed around and failed to confirm. This is an important time check, stopping the clock there for Ivan Basso as he goes through. We get a chance to see whether or not he's going to remain right up there in the second position, waiting for the clock to tick by and let us know just exactly what his time was there as he went through 40 kilometers in the small town of Charnay.
Well, meanwhile, back up by 3 minutes, less than that now, of course, or more than that now, rather, because Basso falling a little bit behind. Basso has gone through in 5th place at 1:07 on Ulrich.
He's still holding on to second place by a couple of seconds. It should have been 1:17 behind if he'd lost it, so I think he's got himself still the lead by around about something like 8 or 9 seconds. It's very close. I think he will lose it in the next section of the course.
And Jan Ullrich could still find himself finishing this Tour de France in 4th place, despite the look of pain on his face. There is confirmation at the moment. Basso, who is not the yellow jersey, of course, he's in 2nd place, but in another 7 seconds' time, that will reverse, and Cloden will be in front of Basso. But the yellow jersey there, a little bit misleading, because, of course, that's Lance Armstrong, and he is well on the way to victory.
It's the overall classification, just separated by 7 seconds as 2nd and 3rd place on the road. And Andreas Cloden now is certainly starting to allow the turbo to kick in. Looks like a very nice bike ride, and I think he's got a long future in the Tour de France ahead of him right now, as long as he can keep on track and focused, unlike his team leader Jan Ullrich, who has this serious problem with putting too much weight on during the winter months. This is the man who started the day in 2nd place in the overall classification, and watch out for this one, because just going through now in 1st place at kilometer 40, Lance Armstrong, 49 minutes and 20 seconds. He's increased his lead again over Ullrich to 51 seconds.
Well, Armstrong is doing that metronomic ride again. He just sits there and pumps the pedals around and builds as he goes. He's the only rider to beat the 50-minute barrier, and it's 49.20 for Armstrong. Not looking good now for Basso at all. He's looking at 3rd place, I think. This is the arrival of Carlos Sastre. Now, Leipheimer came in 1:10.55. If he beats 1:13.06, he will keep his place above Leipheimer. He will do that by a long way. So Leipheimer stays 9th in the Tour de France with this ride by Sastre.
Very good ride by Carlos Sastre there to defend his place in the overall classification. I'm always amazed when I watch Lance Armstrong in a time trial. People say, well, Armstrong couldn't ride a time trial before he had cancer. Well, if they look back through the record books, they'll see that he rode a very fast time trial in the race called the Tour du Pont back in 1996, and that was a time trial run off at around about 36 miles an hour.
Lance Armstrong, the only man of 40 kilometers inside 50 minutes, a 49.20 ride, 49.19, but they'll round it up to 20. It is amazing, Paul. That's the equivalent for 25 miles, 49 minutes on a course like this.
Certainly not a flat course. In fact, there's a couple of very big undulations in this course. Again, he's getting to the part of the course which suits his riding style. He's out of the saddle, keeping that cadence nice and high. He wants this victory here this afternoon. He's already got himself 51 seconds ahead of Jan Ullrich and 1:06 seconds ahead of Andreas Cloden, but a lot more than that over Ivan Basso. In fact, a quick look at the time is he's already pulled back more than 2 minutes and 2 seconds of Ivan Basso, and if Basso is not careful, he might find himself getting caught again before the end, just as he did on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez.
Well, you see now with all the riders through it that Basso started well with a great show of defiance, but he's now fallen right out of the leaderboard at the last check, so he's slipping away now.
Well, the 47 and a half kilometers, we can see that Jan Ullrich has gone through with the best time again, 1 minute and 4 seconds faster than Floyd Landis. This really is a remarkable performance by the T-Mobile rider, but I think that is why all of the riders from US Postal have gone out to try and ride this course as hard as possible. So I'm trying to figure out who is going to be the 3rd counting rider for T-Mobile in this individual time trial, because that's what is important if US Postal want to win the team classification in the Tour de France for a 2nd time.
48 kilometers check. Ullrich is through there now with the best time of just over 1 hour, displacing Landis and Julich. 1 hour and 11 seconds, so he keeps blazing the trail, and it's only Lance Armstrong. It's the old rivalry again, the 1-2 of the Tour de France, except this year I think Ulrich is only going to finish 4th. There's an outside chance he might get 3rd.
I think it's very difficult now. He's separated by 3 minutes from his own teammate Andreas Kloden. He needs to pull back 4 minutes on Ivan Basso, and really I don't think Basso is going to lose that much time. He's ridden a fairly consistent first half of the race. He's riding sensibly. He will probably drop down into 3rd place at the end of the day, but I think Ulrich is just a little bit too far back.
Well, Ulrich's gone through 47.5 kilometres, just seconds over the hour, while Floyd Landis got there in 61 minutes and 14 seconds. Julich in 61 minutes 35. They are the leaders. Basso is holding because he's only conceded, before we get the next check, 1:07 to Ulrich, so there's no way Ulrich's going to take the time required to get out of that 4th place now, because forget his actions against Kloden here. Kloden, we think, might even be closing in now. It'll be a very interesting second check.
Well, it seems to be, because he started off, I think, once again conservatively. All that information will have been relayed back to the men who start at the end of the afternoon by the teammates who started earlier on. They will explain to them how the course is, if you need to start quickly, if you need to start conservatively, and that information will be worked out with the rider and with the team management, and they'll try and ride on a schedule to make sure they've got enough energy left to finish it off. This is Georg Tocznik coming in.
Yes, Georg Tocznik should hold on to his high place finish now. He should have done enough here to keep his 7th place overall in the Tour de France. It was a very good time trial. He's making a huge effort. Only 18th on the day, but here we go. 1:12.39 for him. 18th place for Georg Tocznik. That'll keep him up in 7th overall in the Tour de France, so it's a good ride. Out on course now with Ivan Basso, who's beginning to struggle. Kloden has gone through just 10 seconds slower now than Ulrich at the final check before the finish. He continues to close in on the team captain.
Well, that's amazing. I think he's announcing that he is the new boy on the block with T-Mobile. He's certainly done a very good ride. Started conservatively. He was 3rd at the first time check. He was 3rd at the next time check. And he dropped down to 3rd at the next one. But I think he might be pulling himself just that little bit closer to Jan Ullrich. He was a long way down to begin with, but over the last part of the course, it really is a very difficult course to make sure you get through.
Well, as we watch the big boys close down, just to remind you, we're watching the Powerbar commercial-free half hour, and Kloden is knocking off around 5 seconds every 5 kilometres against his arch rival and friend Jan Ullrich. As we're watching Lance Armstrong bring this time trial to a victorious end here, and that's what it is now. We're waiting for the check coming up at 47.5 kilometres. Kloden, Paul, does appear to be knocking 5 seconds every 5 kilometres off Jan Ullrich. And with, what have we got, about 8 kilometres to go, he could beat Ullrich on the line if he keeps this up.
He very much could do so, and he's super motivated here this afternoon because of the fact that he knows he can climb up one step in the podium. He's too far down to even think about challenging Lance Armstrong, but I think he would like to stand on that next step up in 2nd place when this race goes up to Paris tomorrow morning. But you look at Armstrong here, he's completely and utterly possessed, out of the saddle, accelerating at every possible moment. He'll be having all the information fed to him through that little radio transmitter on his back there, just at the bottom of his spine, into the earpiece in his helmet, and he will be hearing from his team manager, Johan Brunel, that things are looking good. He's setting everybody to right in this final time trial of the Tour de France this year.
Well, he's had an amazing Tour de France. It has all been too easy for Lance Armstrong this year. The 6th win, when 4 men failed to do it, he just came along and continued the way he always has. And this will be his easiest victory of all of the 6 races he has won. He's now going to take out his 5th stage. That's more than he's ever won before. And 4 was his target before then. And look at this now. Kloden hasn't really got the yellow jersey, but he's got the lead over Basso, who falls back into 3rd place in the Tour de France.
Yes, by 17 seconds, Basso will have to hope he can try and recuperate over the end, but I think Kloden is riding a very sensible bike ride here. And, you know, he is doing an exceptionally good job. We're riding along now to the possibility of a huge domination, though, by Lance Armstrong.
Well, Jan Ullrich is the man who's powering his way through. He is setting up the trailblazing, but Lance Armstrong is wiping him out when he comes through, and it looks as though Kloden is also closing in on him rapidly. Landis still holds best time. At the moment, he looks as though he'll finish 3rd or 4th on the stage now, and that's a great result for Floyd Landis. But the big 4 of this year's Tour de France have ridden their best here today. Unfortunately, Basso, the weakest of the time trialists in this group, is now losing his second place overall.
Ulrich down on the bottom end of his handlebars. He might listen to Walter Godefroot next year and maybe study that position in the wind tunnel to improve his time trialing ability. This is Francisco Mancebo, who is not having a very good day at all. He's a long way off the top 20. In fact, he's well outside with a time of 1:13. But the next man to come in, and what a ride this man has done. This is 3 minutes. Jose Acevedo, this is a great ride by him. He'll keep 5th place overall in the Tour.
He'll certainly do that. That's a great ride. 1:10.38. He almost bridged a 3-minute gap there. And right behind him, here comes Jan Ullrich. He's bridging almost a 3-minute gap. Look at that huge cheer to the line. Jan Ullrich, best time, 1:07.50. And that's the loudest cheer we've heard today.
Well, if you look out across the road from here, there are an awful lot of pink jerseys. The supporters are for this man, Jan Ullrich. We're not too far away from the German border, and they've made the journey down here to support the man whose nickname is the Kaiser. He's not going to do the job this afternoon, though, Phil, to his supporters, because he's not going to get onto the podium in Paris.
Well, as we look here at Andreas Klouden, he has now done enough to lift himself into second place. Basso has gone through the third check now, a full 1 minute 30 seconds slower than Ullrich and a 1 minute 20 seconds slower than Andreas Klouden. So he's lost second place here. Here is Basso, now heading down towards the final few kilometres of the time trial. Armstrong awaited at the final check of the day, and we expect that to move him straight back into the lead of this time trial. Ullrich has finished and is now currently best time at 1 hour 7 minutes and 50 seconds.
What a time gap it is as well, 1 minute 24 seconds faster than Floyd Landis. This man has held on to second place for a long time. He was the only man able to stay with Lance Armstrong in the mountains, and looks like Armstrong has just come through with a pretty impressive time here, 59.17, 54 seconds now faster than Jan Ullrich.
30 miles an hour in effect. That represents 59 minutes 17 seconds for Lance Armstrong at the last check of the day. At the finish, Ullrich is in. He won't keep the lead. Armstrong will knock him off the top. 1:07.50. Landis is holding second. Bobby Julich is holding third. George Hincapie, another American, 8th, while Leipheimer is 9th. It'll be all change when the last 3 men out on course arrive. That's 4 out on course arrive. This is Andreas Kloden, who is now into second place in the Tour de France. What a reversal of form for this man, who seemed to be dropping away from the top level of international cycling after a very, very promising year 2000. It is now a terrific situation here. As the finish time, 1:07.02 is they're saying there. Oh, they're counting his time, I beg your pardon. 1:07.50 is the leading time at the finish now by Jan Ullrich. Now, it doesn't look like he can make it in time to beat Ullrich.
But that's not what's important to him. To him, what is important is to finish ahead of Ivan Basso and to keep himself in second position. Let's not forget, in 2000, he was actually 12th in the Olympic Games time trial, as well as getting himself the bronze medal in the road racing section. There's a huge crowd here. There's a wall of noise as these riders come down the finishing line. Ullrich, I think, will stay in front of his teammate when it comes down to the final classification. But this man has done a remarkable job. He's pulled himself up from third place at the start of the day up into second place overall by tonight.
He's pulled out the time trial of his life here. There is Kloden's time slipping away already. But Jan Ullrich is still going to stay at 1 place better than his team captain, but not going to catch him in the overall at all. Again, the big cheers are rising as Kloden comes up to the line. He's had a pretty tough last sector here, and he's lost a little bit of time by the look of it as he goes back a little bit. But his second time as he comes home at 1:08.16, 26 seconds down in the end. He lost time there. Ullrich put in a great finish, 1:08.16.
Well, Ullrich's got huge power, and he does not weaken down towards the end. But this man started very quickly, and he's rivaled all of the big names here in the individual time trial. A massive improvement over his performances of the last 3 years. But we did say in 2000 that this guy was going to be the next great German star. Just 2 riders left to come in. This man, Ivan Basso, and maybe only 30 seconds behind him on the road is a certain Lance Armstrong.
Poor old Basso, 3 kilometres from the finish, and Kloden has finished. He can't possibly keep his lead in the Tour de France over Kloden now. He's too far out from the line. Ivan Basso, who promised everything, especially, and gave all in the mountains. He even rivaled Lance Armstrong there. Hasn't been the master of the time trial.
And pulling
Now,
back like this
is a bad sign.
Probably indicates that very shortly we will see the yellow jersey coming into the picture, and here he is.
Well, there he is. It took him only 12.5 kilometers to catch Ivan Basso for a couple of minutes up Alpe d'Huez. But now, starting 3 minutes back here, it's taken him a while longer, but it could be a finale finish here. 2.5 kilometers to race to the line, and Lance Armstrong has the pole of the rider who was starting this race second in the Tour de France. And if he can just keep on chasing him down, it's the best magnet you could possibly have.
Well, if he catches him, it will be a huge margin back to second place overall in the Tour de France, because if he catches him before the line, we'll have wiped out the 3 minutes that they started apart on today's stage, and he will be 7 minutes and 9 seconds ahead of him in the overall classification.
Yes, and that's the Cloden will come over, of course. He'll be up into second as well. But there's one thing that is quite clear through all the calculations. Lance Armstrong is head and shoulders above anybody else in this year's Tour de France. There he is as he crosses back over the River Doubs, which is the river he crossed on his way out on this circular course. Different bridge, of course, as he's now racing in here. There is the 2 kilometers to go, and Lance Armstrong is still lining up that man in front and trying to pull him in by the line. Impressive, to say the least.
It's a real added boost to the morale when you can see the rider, you can see the cars behind the rider in front of you. It just pushes you that little bit further on up towards the final few kilometers of the race. You can see Basso has really suffered this afternoon. He's a great mountain climber, but he doesn't have the ability yet to ride a very good individual time trial. But he has improved. Let's not forget last year he lost massive chunks of time in the final time trial up the road into Nantes, and here he can just look up in front of him and see the red kite, which indicates he's going to start the last 1,000 yards of the race.
There it is, the kilometer kite for Ivan Basso. It didn't come soon enough. It's cost him second place in the Tour de France. He'll still get third because Jan Ullrich has not taken the time required to climb over him, and he's certainly not taken the time required to climb over his teammate Andreas Cloden. This has been very definitely a race of reality today. And here comes Armstrong. He dips under. He's about 150, 200 meters behind Ivan Basso. Knowing this man here, he will lift it even more to try and get this rider before the line. They could swing in the home straight almost together. Basso has given everything left in his body today. It hasn't been enough, but like all Tour de France riders, they give everything they possibly can. They're all great professionals.
He's inside now, the last little section of the individual time trial. Armstrong will try and catch him, but he might not just do it before the finishing line. He doesn't really need to either as he come up and they start to straighten out. Basso is inside of the last 500 meters. He's tried and he's ridden the individual time trial of his life here this afternoon, and just around that corner the clock will stop for Ivan Basso, and almost as soon as he cuts the line we will see the shadow of the yellow jersey coming out of the gloom.
Well, Basso's time just now has gone by. Second place has left him in the Tour de France. The rest is how far he will now be behind Andreas Cloden, but he will be ahead of Jan Ullrich. He will be on the podium, but he's lost the second place finish. Huge sprint finish, and not by much, I have to say. He hits the line at 1:09:39, and now comes Lance Armstrong, again with all of his rivals under his nose, and the look at that time, 1:06:49. Lance Armstrong just confirmed his Tour de France win.
Look at that average speed as well, Phil. 49 kilometers an hour for Lance Armstrong. That is one of the fastest time trials we've had in the Tour de France over many, many years, and over this distance as well. 55 kilometers of racing. He has done what he wanted to do here this afternoon. He has confirmed his authority. He's banged on the table with his fist to say, I am the boss, I am the winner. The wearer of the yellow jersey needs to win the final time trial stage, and it's his 5th win at the Tour de France this year.
He matches the record of Laurent Fignon, 5 wins. First time Lance has won 5 stages, of course. What a way to go out as a winner of the Tour de France for a record-breaking 6th time. 5 stage wins, the master of the time trials, the master of the mountains, the master of the team time trial. He's left absolutely nothing, just the skeleton for everybody else in this year's Tour de France. That's the scrum, and just look at it. because everybody knew that right now was the day that Lance Armstrong confirmed himself as the winner of his 6th Tour de France. Well, there he is. He's back behind the safety fence, and he can have just a few moments to get himself ready for another yellow jersey. We, of course, will see him get it, and now he knows that tomorrow he can ride to Paris and he doesn't have to turn a pedal in anger.